Section 8 of Tribal Custom in Anglo-Saxon Law. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Tribal Custom in Anglo-Saxon Law by Frederic Seebohm. Chapter 4, Tribal Custom of the Irish Tribes, Part 2. 3. The gradations in rank under the Brehon laws. The gradations in the honor price, as stated in the Grith Gavach, become very important from the light thrown by them upon the structure of tribal society in Ireland. At the bottom of the list of these grades is mentioned in Midboth, man or ordinary freeman, without land or cows. He is said to be entitled as food allowance to the humblest fare of milk and stirabout, and for himself alone. His honor price is only a dared heifer, or kolpak heifer, and his honor price, as that of other grades, is also the limit of the value of his oath or pledge. He is a man who has not yet attained to a household of his own. When he has done that, he seems to rise to the next rank of an oggeir, a.e., a young heir. Suddenly, we are told of the og-heir that he has 7 cows and a bull, 7 pigs, 7 sheep, and a horse. He also has a cow land, i.e., land to graze 7 cows, for which a cow is paid every year by him to his chief. He has an ox, and a 4th part of the needful for plowing, i.e., presumably he joins with others in making up a plow team of 4 oxen. Surely these have been supplied to him by his chief, as in the case of the Cymric Da. His proportionate stock, Turcreek, is 8 cows, which, with his land, he gets from a bow-heir, possessed of surplus cattle, and he pays to him a food rent bes tiggy, like the Welsh questva, of a cow and a pig, etc. Should his stock increase, he does not always become at once a bow-heir, because 4 or 5 such may occupy the land of a bow-heir, and it would not be easy for each of them to be a bow-heir. So in the same way, a bow-heir has land of twice 7 cumhals, and he has half a full ploughing apparatus, and his proportionate stock from his chief is 12 cows, and a kolpak heifer is his food rent, and his honor price is 5 seds. A bow-heir may have a full and complete plow team and 20 cows and other things, and he may even rise to the giving of proportionate stock to tenants of his own, if his stock should have grown too much for his land. But he still may remain a bow-heir. He may, however, rise from a bow-heir into a flaith, or chief, when he has double as much as an heirdessa, and has established himself with a green round his homestead, and so surrounded his house with a precinct in which he can give protection to cattle taken in distress, this being one of the important duties and functions of a chief, flaith. It would seem that even when a man has risen to be the chief of his kindred, fine, he may still be simply a bow-heir, and not necessarily yet a flaith chief. In another tract, among other disconnected items, are the following. Whatever number of the divisions of the bow-heirs happen to be contending, though one of them be older than the others, the grade which is most wealthy, i.e., in point of wealth, it is it that takes precedent. He is a hill of chieftainship in the 3rd person. Unless his father and grandfather were flaith, though he may be of the same race as to his origin, his chieftainship is lost to him. A plebeian chief is one whose father or grandfather was not a chief, flaith. It would seem from these statements that to become a flaith from the rank of bow-heirs, something like an election was needful, and that wealth weighed most in the election. It shows, however, that it was election out of a class or family in which the flaithship descended from father to son, and that one of the qualifications was that a man's father and grandfather before him must have been flaiths. So too in the Crith Gavlach, the heir Disa must be the son of an heir and the grandson of an heir. He has probably a minimum of 10 tenants, 5 galena and 5 seer, and gets a food rent from each, but he himself takes proportionate stock from his chief, for which he pays food rent in the same way. The heir Ard has 20 tenants, 10 galena, and 10 seer, and in his turn he takes proportionate stock from his chief. The heir Twissi has 27 tenants, 15 galena, and 12 seer, and he takes himself proportionate stock from a king, and he makes chorus arrangements in the wraith right of his father and grandfather, whatever this may be. Above him is the heir Forgal, with 40 tenants, and at the head of the flaith or chieftain grade becomes the Rai Twaith, who is the chief or king of a troth. We need not attempt to discuss the details of this hierarchy of chieftains. It is enough that throughout, the lower chieftain takes stock from and pays food rents to the higher chieftain, or the Ri Twath, as the case may be, so that the grades of tribal rank were connected by the link formed by the receipt of an allotment of stock from, and the payment of food rent to, the next superior grade. Concentrating attention now on the fine, or group dependent upon a single flaith or chief, we have seen that it consisted not only of his kindred, but also of other dependents. We have seen that the chief had both galena and seer tenants, and that he supplied these tenants with stock, and received food rent and services in return. In the second volume of the Senchus More are 2 chapters on seer wraith and deer wraith, and the 2 kinds of tenancy are explained somewhat as follows. In the seer wraith, the stock is given without any pledge, and the return of it is 1/3 in value as food rent every year, and the tenant has to perform what is translated as homage, and to do service on the dun fort at harvest time and on military expeditions, but he does no manual labor. The seer tenant cannot separate from his own hereditary tribal chieftain, or refuse to take stock from him, and to that extent he seems to be adscriptus glebbi. But if he chooses to receive stock from another chief, he can give it up when he likes, unless not having returned it for 3 lifetimes, he has let the chief get a permanent hold on him. But this must not be so as to rob his own tribe of their innate rights. This freedom to take stock from other chieftains does not, therefore, seem to alter his position or that of his successor as permanent tenants of their own hereditary chieftain, and this applies both to his higher chieftain of kingly rank and his own lesser chieftain of flaith rank. He cannot separate from his own king at any time, either in seer wraith or deer wraith, unless the chief be indigent. His own heir of the flaith grade is in the same position as his own king. On the other hand, while in the case of stock taken from another chieftain, the contract can be ended on either side except after 3 lives, the hereditary king or chieftain cannot, without good reason, withdraw the stock from the tenants. If he be his own king, he can never take away either his seer stock or deer stock, unless the tenant be indigent, and there are no life separations between the tenant and his own hereditary king, unless either of them act illegally, etc. The tightness of the tribal bond is shown still more clearly by the statement that the chieftain himself is not competent to forgive, so as to bind his successors the food rent due from the tenant. The food rent is free to the successors of the chief, for the chief is not competent to forgive the payment of what supplies his house. So much we gather from the chapter on seer wraith. Now to the deer wraith. No one was bound to take deer stock from anyone, not even from his own chieftain or king. Taking deer stock was therefore a matter of contract, and a contract by a tribesman affected his fine or kindred. The stock is received by the tenant either with or without the knowledge of the fine, for if it was unknown to them, they could impugn his contract, but if it was within their knowledge, though the stock be ever so great, it is fastened upon them. The fine had a voice, presumably lest it should be found that the cattle in their family herd, unknown to them, might belong to some outside chieftain, and further, if continued for 3 lives, the obligation might become permanent, as in the case of Sayre's stock. Besides these, deer and seer tenants, who had taken stock from their chieftain or king, and who seem to have been to a great extent adscripti glebe, there is mention of fudir tenants. They seem to be strangers, admitted like the Cymric altitudes, upon a chieftain's land, and like the Cymric altitudes, free to move away, until by residence for 3 generations, they also have become recognized as freemen, and at the same time, adscriptis glebe. In the tract, Divisions of the Tribe of a Territory, is the following mention of the fudir tenants, confirming what has been said above. It occurs in the commentary. His fudir tenants, i.e., they become free during the time of 3 persons. The 4th man is called a deer bokhak person. The 5th is a sencleth person. The 5th person would be the great-great-grandson of the original fudir. Further on is the following. The families of the fudir tenants are subject to manifold divisions. The son is enriched in the same ratio as his father, and the father does not sell anything to the prejudice of his sons, grandsons, great-grandsons, or great-great-grandsons. The chief point of interest is that the men of the 4th generation of fudirs, according to the above-quoted passages, become deer botok persons, half-free men, and the 5th generation senclith, so that the family, like the Cymric stranger, grew into freedom in 4 or 5 generations. The gradual growth of fudirs into senclith tenants in 5 generations of occupation is illustrated by the retention of rights for a corresponding period. In the Book of Ekel is a statement that the land of imbecile person, a fool's land, is not lost to his descendants, though they be also imbeciles, till 5 persons, that is, till the 5th generation. The number of generations required does not, however, seem to have been absolutely uniform. The following is from the Crith Kablach. If there be service from them, courtier and fudir tenants which he, the chief, brings upon the land, 2 flaith chiefs to 9 times 9 years, they are courtiers and fudir tenants. They are senclith tenants from that out. In the editor's note to the sequel to the Crith Kablach, there is a statement that the senclith tenant was a man who came from his natural chief to settle under another chief, and if he or his successors continued away during the time of 3 successive chiefs, with the knowledge of the former chief, and unclaimed by him or his successors, he or they then become senclith, and could not go away of themselves nor be claimed by the other. These passages taken together seem to imply that after 5, or sometimes 3, generations of tenancy under the same chieftain or his successors, the fudir tenants became in some sense adscripti glebe, like the Cymric altitudes, and at the same time formed a group of kindred very much like a Cymric gwelly. Beyond this, it is not easy to realize the position of the senclith person. The text of the Brehon law tracts is often very obscure, and the commentary so imperfect that the suggestion again and again occurs to the student that the commentator may sometimes himself be groping in the dark. Moreover, all the Brehon tracts have not yet been published, so that we have as yet only part of the evidence before us. Still, it seems to be safe to say that there are indications that, as in Wales, there were rungs in the social ladder by which the stranger unfree tenant might, after a certain number of generations, climb into something like freedom and tribal rights at the cost of becoming at the same time attached to the land of the chieftain, and that to the freeman. Also, the grades of social rank were in some measure dependent upon the social position of fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers, as well as upon the acceptance of stock and the payment of food rent and the performance of services to chieftains of higher rank. Further, without pressing too far resemblances which are not complete between Irish and Cymric custom, it may at least be suggested that the Irish example of the acceptance of stock by the young og heir from the chief of his family, or some higher chieftain whose man he was or became, may throw some light upon the Cymric provision of da, or cattle, to the young tribesman who became man and kin to the chieftain, who gave it for his maintenance. In the Irish instance, this bestowal and acceptance of stock was part of a system which ran through all ranks and grades, and it seems to have formed the natural link connecting one social rank with another, and securing some kind of solidarity in the whole kindred or tribe, in addition to the tie of blood relationship and sometimes as a substitute for it. We are now in a position to consider the amount of honor price of the various grades in tribal society, as exhibited in the Brehon tracts, and to judge how far it was an important addition to the Kirk Dira, and whether it raised the Irish Eric to an amount at all near to that of the Galanas of the Cymric codes. In the Crith Gablach, the honor price of each grade is given below. Midboth men a Deert heifer, or Colpack heifer. Og heir, 3 seds of cow kind. Bow heir, 5 seds, or 1 cumhall. Heir disa, 10 seds, or 2 cumhalls. Heir ard, 15 seds, or 3 cumhalls. Heir twisi, 20 seds, or 4 cumhalls. Heir fugale, 15 seds, 30 seds, or 6 cumhalls. Rye teeth, 7 cumhalls. The honor price is given to the Crith Gablach in seds. The number of cumhalls, or female slaves, is taken from a list in the Book of Achill, and from a statement in the Census More, in which the honor price of the heir fugale is stated to be 6 cumhalls. It seems, then, that the honor price of the Retaith, the highest chieftain, was 7 cumhalls, whilst the honor price of the bow heir only amounted to 1 cumhall, that of the og heir to only 3 2-year-old heifers, whilst that of the simple freeman without land or cattle was only 1 single heifer. The whole Eric fine for homicide, including the Kirk Dira and additional payments of honor price, evidently fell very far short of that of the Cymric Galanas. Even in the case of the Retroth, or highest chieftain, slain by one of his own rank, the Eric can hardly have exceeded the Galanas of the young unmarried Cymric tribesman, viz. of 60 cows. The importance of the Irish tribal custom of the honor price of a tribesman, and its gradation in proportion to rank, position, and wealth in the tribe, is apparent quite apart from the question of homicide. It ruled the value of his oath, of his guarantee, of his pledge, and of his evidence. These, according to the Crith Gablach, were the 4 things in which he acted to the extent of his honor price, and he was not competent to undertake liabilities beyond this limit. This becomes very important when we realize how large a place the system of congregation, or the support of a kinsman by the oaths of his fellow kinsmen, filled in tribal usage. On the other hand, whilst the honor price of a tribesman or chieftain was the limit up to which his power of giving protection to his fellow tribesmen, by oath or pledge or otherwise, extended, it also was the measure of his own protection. He was entitled to his honor price not only in case of homicide, if he was satirized or insulted, or if the protection he afforded to others was violated, or his house was burned, or anyone stole from him, out of his house or in it, or forced his wife or his daughter. His honor price was the measure of the amount of redress he could claim for the wrong. The analogy of this to the Kimritzarid is obvious, and something like it is found in most tribal systems. Finally, imperfect and vague in some points as may be the result of the foregoing examination of the Irish evidence, we are now perhaps in a position to appreciate, for what it is worth, the curious case described in the Census more. It may be taken so far as it goes as a precedent or indication of the way in which the intricate matters connected with the Eric fine and honor price were worked out in practice, though it is difficult to explain all the rulings of the Brehon experts. The matter in dispute was between two of the three principal races of Erin, the Feni, or men of the north, and the Ulad, or men of the south. Fergus was the son of the king of the Ulad, owing to a quarrel among the Feni. Oa Beldi, being expelled by Conn of the 100 Battles, had fled from his own tribe and put himself under the protection of Fergus. Whilst under the protection of Fergus, Oha was killed by Aesel, the son of Conn, and by 4 sons of Budi, and a grandson of Budi. The latter, being the son of Budi's daughter Dorn by a stranger, was not acknowledged by her kindred. Fine. The Eric fine for this outrage upon the protection of Fergus was thus arranged. He was to have 3 times 7 kumhals, i.e., 7 kumhals in gold, 7 in silver, and land of 7 kumhals called Inber Eidner. This was in satisfaction for the crime of the 6 murders, viz., the son of Conn, and the 4 sons and the grandson of Buddha. 5 out of 6 slayers apparently were able to pay their share, but not so the 6th, viz., the grandson of Buddha, the illegitimate son of his daughter Dorn, who, being unrecognized by the kindred, apparently had no claim for help from them. Consequently, Dorn, the mother of the illegitimate grandson, was handed over to Fergus as a bondswoman in pledge for her son's share of the Eric. So matters stood for a time, but a new trouble arose, which seems to have upset the whole settlement and made it necessary to consider it over again from the beginning. It would seem that, after all, there was a question whether the land in Ber Eilben was permanently handed over or only for a time, and redeemable within the period of the lives of 3 chieftains, because there was a question whether such a period had expired or not. And again it was claimed that Dorn was only given in temporary bondage as a pledge for her illegitimate son's share of the Eric. Besides these doubts, new circumstances had created a new position. Fergus was unfortunate enough to have suffered a blemish on his face. This, being a serious matter in a chieftain, was studiously kept from his knowledge. Dorn, acting as bondwoman, was one day, according to the story, preparing a bath for Fergus. Fergus complained that she was too slow about it and struck her with the horsewhip. She, being vexed, reproached him with his blemish, and for his insult Fergus slew her on the spot. Very shortly afterwards Fergus himself died. This, then, was the new position, causing a new quarrel between the 2 tribes, and involving the reopening of the old one. The interest lies in the way in which it was settled. A balance was now struck between the crimes on each side, beginning with the slaying of Eho, while under the protection of Fergus as follows. Fergus, being king of a province, was entitled to 18 kumhals both as earfine and honor price for the violation of his protection. There were also due to him 9 kumhals for his half earfine and half honor price for Don's insult in reproaching him with the blemish, so that this was altogether 27 kumhals to Fergus. On the other side, the Feni claimed as follows. Honor price was demanded by the Feni for the killing of Dorn the pledge, for the pledge they had given was without limitation of time, and for 20 kumhals were payable by Fergus for earfine and honor price, for the authority of Fergus was opposed at the time. This seems to have settled the matter between the two tribes, i.e., so to speak, the public matter between the Finney and Fergus's people. But there were individual rights to be considered also, besides these 23 kumhals due to his tribe. Biddy was entitled to honor price for the killing of his daughter, i.e., he was an heir fulgale of the middle rank and was entitled to 6 kumhals as honor price. Her brother was also entitled to honor price for his death, and he was an heir ad and was entitled to 4 kumhals as his honor price. Why the other brother had no claim for honor price does not appear. Perhaps the one brother was the representative of the brothers as a class. The total sum demanded on Dorn's side was therefore 23 plus 6 plus 4 kumhals equals 33 kumhals. So that this, which the men of the south demanded, amounted to 33 kumhals, and the men of the north demanded 27, and a balance was struck between them, and it was found that an excess of 6 kumhals was due by the men of the north, for which the land Iper Defang was again restored by the men of the north. The commentary goes on to say, and it is evident from this, that when a man has paid Eric fine, should the person to whom it has been paid commit a crime against him, the law orders that his own Eric fine should be restored to the former, should it be better than the other Eric fine. In this case, the land which had been taken by Fergus as 7 kumhals of land was returned to pay for the balance due of 6 kumhals only. It will be observed that whilst the father and brother of Dorn had their own honor price allowed for her slaying, no Kirk Dira was claimed for the life of Dorn herself. The reason is given as follows. What is the reason that the land was restored by the people of the north, and that the Eric fine for the woman was not restored, whereas both had been given to Fergus as Eric fine for trespass? The reason is the woman committed an offense in the north for which she was forfeited, and the land did not commit any offense for which it could be forfeited, but it was returned in part payment for that trespass, i.e., the killing of Dorn. End of section 8.